do this. And I'm going to spotlight myself. There we go. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nikki Actipis, and I will be your MC today. I am also the president of Kansas City Oasis. So Kansas City Oasis is a 501c3, which means we are here for the good of community. And we have 5 core values that we follow. So our core values are: reality is known through reason, human hands solve human problems, be accepting and be accepted, meaning comes from making a difference, and people are more important than beliefs. So if you are new here, that is new to you. If you are not new here, it's always a good reminder, because, you know, it's always good to be reminded to what we're up to, right? So today we have a pretty great program, and we're switching it up a little bit because our featured speaker is running on a tight schedule, but I'm super glad they are here this morning. So for our musical guests, we will have Amber Martin. For our community moment speaker, we will have our very own Sarah. Hopefully her story will be more interesting than the story I told you all earlier. And we have Dr. Richard Andrews from Houston Oasis to give us an update about how Texas is doing in the middle of a pandemic. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Amber to play us a song. And Amber, whenever you are ready, you are welcome to start playing. You can introduce yourself a little bit more, whatever you're feeling this morning.
Okay, thank you so much. So I played I think it was in January is the last time I played for you guys. I recently moved, so it's a little different environment in my living room. But I've been writing songs and playing out a lot lately. So I'm gonna play you a song that I wrote a couple months ago. And it's called I Got Time. So let me see.
Put me in the fire.
stopping by. I'm just stopping by to steal your shirt. I'm just stopping by. I'm just stopping by to steal your shirt. And that's the song.
So if you can see, we have a whole bunch of folks giving you a silent round of applause. We had some hearts going on earlier too. So just really quick, because I know we're switching up the format today and we will hear from you later on. I heard you talking to Jason earlier as you were all getting sound set up. You had a concert last night. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, so I've been playing a lot. So I'm an X-ray tech during the week, but on the weekends I play music as much as I can. I've been playing at different breweries around upstate New York. I don't know if you are familiar with the Finger Lakes region, but there's a bunch of wineries and breweries in the area, and I have like a chill vibe. So when you're sipping on some wine and chilling out, it's a fun time. But last night I played at this museum, and I played with this kid that I grew up with. So he was playing a show, and he wanted me to open for him, and we played at this old train station, and it was very picturesque.
That sounds beautiful. Well, when everything blows over, we'll have to come visit you up there. I feel like an Oasis field trip is in order. And I would also like to say your music is so chill. My little friend here was just like napping and he was just enjoying it. So
Chilled
Mr.
out.
Captain Murder appreciates your music. I appreciate it. And we will hear back from you after coffee break.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, like I said at the top of the hour, yes, top of the hour, we're going to switch things up a little bit today because our featured speaker has other obligations, but we are so happy he is here. So, I'm going to turn over the floor to Dr. Richard Andrews here, and I think he's got some stuff to say about what's happening in Texas. So he is part of the Houston Oasis community. So if you could give him a big silent welcome, that would be awesome. So Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you need to, I know you've got a screen share going on, and I will shut right up.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. Hey, everybody. It's always great to commune with other Oasians. I suppose it's good to commune with normal humans also, but it's good to commune especially with other Oasians. So let's get right to it here. If I can find my slides, that is, let me see, hold on a second. Okay, well, you can see the slides, I think, but I can't. So let me see. How can I do that? Let's see. We should have gotten a more competent speaker here, Nikki.
You are all good. It's been a wild ride learning all of the technologies for everyone.
Okay, so you can see my slides now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and you can hear me. So yeah, I decided to call this Strange Brew partly because as somebody who likes old rock and roll, that's a nice song from the group Cream, but also anything, Texas plus anything is usually a strange brew. So, and there'll be a little bit of science, a little bit of politics, and a little discussion of happiness and mental health here. And so let's see, my own background, so just so you know who's talking to you. I've been a family doctor for a little over 30 years. I also studied preventive medicine and public health. And inevitably, being a family doctor during the pandemic, you can't get away with not, I mean, you have to deal with COVID, of course. So I had a lot of COVID patients. Now that was in the outpatient setting, which is a little easier than dealing with very sick patients in an ICU. But and I swabbed about 1 million patients myself. 1 million may be a little bit of an overestimate, but it was a lot of people. It felt like 1 million. And and then another doctor and I, another Oasis doctor and I from Houston Oasis, for over a year, starting early in the pandemic, we would do a weekly Zoom session to review the latest COVID science and answer questions and just sort of help give ourselves and other people another socializing opportunity and that sort of thing. And so what I liked about it, apart from just socializing with people, was it forced me to review the science every week and get pretty familiar with it. I stopped doing family medicine in June of this year. I enjoyed it, but I don't want to work that hard anymore. So I've been interested in addiction for a very long time. And so I'm now doing addiction medicine. I work in a methadone clinic here in Houston. And so I really find that gratifying and interesting. And I hope to do a lot more of that. Okay, so I know you guys have heard too much about COVID over the last couple years, but here it is anyway. So I looked at the latest. This information comes primarily from many of you are familiar with the Johns Hopkins COVID information website that kind of keeps track of COVID numbers around the world. So in the last 28 days, the US still has a lot of COVID. We have more than anybody. In the last 28 days, we've had a quarter of the world's cases. That probably is an overestimate because, of course, in many parts of the world where they have less technology and whatnot and less in the way of healthcare availability, then they're also getting COVID, but they may not be able to report it as accurately. I mean, even we're not reporting it as accurately as we should, and we had about 15% of the world's COVID related deaths in the last 28 days. Again, that's probably a bit of an overestimate. And we've had increased after improving into the summer. Then we started, of course, seeing more of the Delta variant, which is far more contagious. And so after having an improving ICU bed occupancy situation, we started going backwards on that one. So let's see here. And let me go back to, okay. And as far as the percent vaccinated, and this measure looks at how many people have had at least one COVID shot. In the US, it's roughly 66%, and all of the states represented here are behind the 8 ball on COVID vaccination. So Texas at 60%, and Missouri and Kansas 54 and 59% respectively. So we need to do a little bit better on that, at least those of us that believe that vaccines can help in this instance. Texas, by the numbers, the test positivity rate, now it's considered, I guess I shouldn't say a positive sign, that would be confusing. It's considered a good thing when your test positivity rate is less than 5%. Texas has had higher numbers than it should for a long time, and so we're currently at 12%, but we're in our third major surge of the pandemic. The current surge has about a similar number of cases of COVID as in last winter, which was the worst surge, and up until now at least. And the COVID deaths are nearly the same as last winter. And of course, in any state or country, the whether you have surges or not often has to do with policy. And you guys have seen examples of that in your own states. Kansas and Missouri, by the numbers, the test positivity rates are 23% and 11.7 currently, and both Kansas and Missouri are in their second major surges, as opposed to Texas in our third. And the surges are generally lower than last winter's, and the deaths are lower. So you're doing worse than Texas in some ways and better in other ways, better in most ways, I would say. And I have no doubt that that is related to local policies in all three cases, local and state policies. So Texas state COVID policies, of course, the governor and the legislature have the most impact, especially the governors, I would say, but sometimes governors' hands are tied by the legislature. And so, but in Texas, the governor is the main thing. And so Governor Abbott has been pretty good on some COVID measures, some public health measures. He has disappointed some of his extremely conservative supporters by having any public health oriented policies, but for the most part, he's not quite doing what he should be, in my opinion. He opposes virtually all mandates, or nearly all mandates. Now early on, there were some policies that were helpful. For example, he did have a partial shutdown of the Texas economy early on, but he exempted quite a few different businesses. So it was really only sort of a semi-shutdown, I would say. And we might have done a lot better had there been more of a shutdown, even if it was for a shorter period. And of course, the people exempted were businesses that had a lot of, of course, when a business isn't allowed to shut down, for example, the entire construction industry wasn't allowed to shut down, and much of the hospitality sector, hotels and restaurants, that sort of thing. And so that involves a lot of lower income folks and people without health insurance and that kind of stuff. So that led to continued high numbers in those groups. And it's been curious because, of course, as a conservative, and I have nothing against conservatives, but conservatives, of course, are all about pro-business policies, and everything's got to be pro-business. But sometimes it is what appears to be a pro-business policy, and yet, depending on which constituency is being, whose favor is being curried. For example, Abbott made sure there was he put in place a policy where businesses are not allowed to require clients be masked or clients be vaccinated. He just forbid that altogether. And so that affected a lot of businesses that wanted to have some mandates because they figured it was good for their other clients and good for their business and good for their staff. So that was kind of interesting because it provided a conflict between sort of usual pro-business policy and this. The health department has done fairly as well as it can under the leadership. And I would say health departments nearly everywhere do the best they can. So I talked about this stuff already. And local governments who were in many cases, the cities in Texas tend to be more science oriented, more public health oriented with regard to the pandemic, and less politically oriented. And so local government, for example, in Houston City, and then Harris County is the county that we're in. And both Houston and Harris County have basically taken their cues from the public health department and local doctors and that sort of thing, and by what the science shows. But they've been told, and as much as Governor Abbott has said, no, you're not allowed to do this, and no, you're not allowed to do that. And so there's been a lot of pushback on that. And the politics, of course, apart from being important to all of us, is also interesting to watch, at least for those of us that are sort of political junkies. And so one of the local school boards, for example, had a creative way of getting around Governor Abbott's order that schools were not allowed to mandate masks. And so one of the local school boards simply changed their dress policy and said that masks were now part of the new dress code. And of course, that eventually got shot down by a judge. But I thought that was pretty creative, actually. And I realize not everybody in this group is enthusiastic about masks, but so I'm just letting you know what went on. As far as local COVID policies, both the county and the city in Houston and in a number of other localities in Houston, especially the urban localities and some rural localities, have been very pro-vaccine, with money incentives, for example, for getting vaccines. There's availability of vaccine at many, many sites, including some of the large sports arenas in town. Some mask mandates, and then we talked about the school district policies already. Here's some of the Houston and Harris Health cartoons, public health cartoons they came up with. At least, I guess they were trying to capture the football fans. J.J. Watt is a popular local, or maybe he's no longer in Houston, but anyway, a popular local football star. And a little bit violent there, I apologize, but and then here's another one. I guess that one's a little violent too, isn't it? So how far apart is 6 feet? And then here's another one that has particular relevance for Houston and Harris County, because we get a lot of hurricanes and a lot of rain and whatnot down here. And so anytime it rains, we all get a little PTSD down here. And now this one is a little bit of a sidestep, but I thought it was interesting. This was an idea when I was preparing for this talk. I saw that the British Medical Association had come out with a statement saying that long COVID should be considered an occupational hazard or occupational disease. And I was intrigued by that. And the first thing I thought about was essential workers, but people who were forced to be working in a restaurant where or in a bar, especially where people are not masked and that sort of thing. But the article was actually talking about healthcare workers like doctors and nurses and so on. And I would say anybody who is required by the nature of their job to expose themselves more to COVID, if they then get COVID, I think we should be, policy should be reasonable on that. Of course, many of you have followed the FDA's advisory committee goings on recently. Now, this is not mandatory for the FDA to follow this, but 16 out of the 18, as you may have heard, voted not to recommend that third mRNA vaccine for the general population, and that was 16 out of 18 on the committee. So that, I think the evidence, using whatever criteria they were using, did not really support that for the general population. They, of course, had already recommended it for immunosuppressed individuals, and the FDA advisory committee just in the last day or two did vote to recommend boosters, that is to say the third mRNA shot for people who are, and Pfizer in particular so far, for people who are 65 or older. Now, I'm interested also in the effect of COVID on other situations, other conditions. And so since I work in a methadone clinic, I'm particularly interested in this issue. I'm interested in mental health issues generally, but also particularly in addiction and the consequences of it. And so there has been during the pandemic, perhaps no surprise, an increase in drug use generally, and an increase in overdoses, an increase in overdose deaths. Because ideally, if there is an overdose, there's not a death associated with the overdose, especially if we have reasonable policies surrounding that, which we usually do not have reasonable policies in Texas. And as a consequence, there is increased funding for addiction treatment. And now that's not just related to COVID, of course. That was something that was happening anyway, due to a rising trend in these situations for a number of years. And but it's fascinating to look back also at the history of pandemics, and in particular, the most recent one, of course, being the most recent significant pandemic was the 1918 flu pandemic, which most of us were not around at that time, but it's fascinating to look back at it, and you'll see so many amazing parallels with today in terms of the politics, in terms of attitudes, in terms of all that stuff. Wearing masks, not wearing masks, all that kind of stuff. It's all reflected, or nearly all of it, in the history of the Spanish flu. And when you look back, these are two links. Anybody who wants a copy of these slides, by the way, I'm happy to send it to you, and I'll send it to Nikki anyway, at a minimum. And and you're also welcome to contact me. But it's fascinating when you look back and you see descriptions, even descriptions as far back as the 1300s, of mental health consequences, not just physical health consequences, but mental health consequences of pandemics. This is not a new thing. But there's huge amounts of both current and past evidence of increases in anxiety, in particular, increases in depression, increases in PTSD, which we probably all have a little bit now. So we need to take that into account, not only for ourselves, but for people around us and members of because each of us is in several different communities, of course. And so we need to be conscious of that and reach out. Loneliness has increased. I was saying loneliness and maybe looniness have both increased a little bit. And so we're all a little bit loony. And but I would say it's really fascinating to look at the history of these. I was looking, for example, I have an Indiana connection because my father was from Indiana. And so I found a fascinating article looking at sort of the before and after of the local picture in Indiana in connection with the 1918 flu. Of course, that flu was often called the Spanish flu. But that was only because Spain was one of the only countries not censoring its news. And that's why we understood it to be the Spanish flu, is because all these other countries were preventing the story from getting out. That pandemic, by the way, didn't start in China. It appears most experts think it started in Kansas and then spread to Europe because American troops were going over there. And then it came back from Europe and the rest of the world. So that was actually the American flu. So let's see what else we have here. Here's another link, a fascinating link talking about pandemics in history. I think some of us just love to read about history and that kind of stuff, but it's particularly relevant and interesting here. And so my contact information is there on the screen. Any of you are welcome to email me or call me. I'll send my slides to anybody. And then I'll send my slides to Nikki as well. So I hope I haven't gone over, and I'm available for questions whenever you want, or whenever Nikki says.
Well, first off, thank you so much for all of that information. We're gonna take a quick coffee break, and then when we come back, there are some questions in the chat already. So think of this time as time to think of more questions for our expert here. And also, if you have him in your breakout room, feel free to ask your questions there, and it might, spark your brain to ask even more questions. So give me a second to get breakout rooms set up. And it looks like we're good to go. So we're going to take 10 minutes in our breakout room, go get a coffee, talk to whoever happens to be in your breakout room. And when we come back, we will ask questions. We'll ask questions. So I will see you all in about 10 minutes. So welcome back, folks. We're
We're
waiting. We're just waiting for other folks to come back in. I hope you had good discussion about whatever you talked about, and we're gonna hold off on music since we've only got a few minutes left with our featured speaker, and we will have music right before our community moment. So let me find Richard here and invite him back up as a spotlight. So again, Richard, I just want to say thank you for being here. I personally find this super refreshing to hear from another scientist, another professional, especially somebody who has a different perspective than I do on everything that is happening. And I want to start off with Marge's comment of that at least one shot percentage is probably not that accurate, because we have a whole bunch of people going in and getting their third shot booster, and in claiming that they are first time shot receivers. So my question off of that is, because you talked a little bit about it already, they were saying that it's not really recommended for most people, the general population. You kind of already spoke to who is more, who should receive it more, but are there any professions that you would say should go get a booster? Like, in your professional opinion, is there anybody in particular besides just immunocompromised people that should go get that third shot, that booster?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I did just see, I think you're right about statistics. Many of you will be familiar with Mark Twain's comment that there are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. And so you always got to be cautious about statistics. But yeah, anyway, yeah, the numbers are certainly thrown off. I mean, I know people, some of my own friends that have, I'm ashamed to say, have gone in and exaggerated or lied or whatever to get that third shot when they were not at the highest risk. But anyway, I would say probably essential workers that are exposed more than other people, people who live with people who are at higher risk of serious disease, at higher risk of death or hospitalization. They could perhaps get that third shot. I think a lot of it has to do with resources. I mean, certainly in the US, since you can go to virtually any pharmacy and get a shot, then, and it's free, then I would say that there's, for the mRNA vaccines, I would say there's no downside, and probably even for the Johnson & Johnson. This is not my official opinion. It was just my seat of the pants opinion, even getting a second Johnson & Johnson shot would be reasonable for most people. Now, with the Johnson & Johnson shot, the evidence suggests that there may be, even that has no significant consequences for most people, but we usually don't recommend it for women under 50, let's say. But otherwise it should be safe for people. And but I would say, yeah, people who themselves, or if they lived with somebody who has greater risk in some way, greater personal risks, then it's reasonable to get that third shot. And what you tell them when you go into the to the clinic or to the pharmacy is that's up to you. But I think there's no downside to it anyway. And now the good news about even 1 and 2 shots, I'm talking about the mRNA vaccines here. The good news about that is the protection against serious illness and death is quite good, even for 2 shots. And I saw a study in the UK looking at nursing home populations where even the protection with a single shot was, surprisingly good. I think it was 62% or something like that. So I think most of us don't need to worry about serious illness or death if you've had 2 of the mRNA shots. And so it basically, having 2 shots for most people turns COVID back into a cold virus. We've all had coronavirus before because, of course, maybe 20% of regular colds are coronaviruses. And so this is simply one that we weren't familiar with. And but basically it already turns it back into a cold. And but if you can get a 3rd shot, then yeah, it'll certainly give you more robust protection, and probably for a longer period. I think that 3rd shot, in fact, will end up, at the beginning we thought maybe 2 shots was a complete series, a complete initial series. Every vaccine type has what's called a complete series. And then you may or may not need boosters after that. So now we basically have learned that 3 shots of the mRNA is a complete series. That's basically what we've learned.
Awesome. So I hope that clears that up for some folks, because I know we already have folks in our community going and getting 3rd shots. I'm due to get what would be my 3rd shot here in a month or so, following those guidelines of, I think it's 8 months, or maybe it's gotten pushed back, but that's what I've been trying to follow, is that guideline instead of jumping the gun, and panicking, be like, oh, it's only been 3 months since my last shot, I got to go get another one. Well, on that note of protections, we have a question that says, to what extent are masks effective if masking is sporadic in enclosed structures? So can you speak to that a little bit? How effective is masking if we're doing it sporadically in public places?
Sure. I would say outside, it's probably not necessary in most situations, unless there's limited circulation, air circulation in the particular outdoor location. Indoors, I would say anytime you can have a mask on, it's good. Remember that masks do 2 things. One, of course, is keeping other people safe from you. Perhaps that's the major benefit. And then in order to keep it, and then of course to protect yourself. So we wear masks for 2 reasons. I would say indoors, unless you're with people that are heavily vaccinated, and especially in your own defined circle of folks, then anytime you can have a mask on indoors, I think it's a good idea, unless, like I say, you're with a small group that well. But there's different kinds of masks. Of course, you have the N95, which is the most effective, but that's uncomfortable for most people to wear for very long. I would wear it when I was swabbing people's noses or seeing patients that I thought might have COVID, but it's uncomfortable to wear all day long, honestly. And then you have the KN95 or the K95, which is a little bit less effective than the N95s. And then the 3rd tier of masks is the so-called medical or surgical masks. Those are just synonyms for the same thing, basically. And then you have cloth masks, which are the least effective. However, even a cloth mask is better than nothing. But then the other thing you can do to make your masks more effective is wear a medical or surgical mask as the first mask, closest to your face, and your cloth mask over that. And then that brings the medical or surgical mask closer to your face, so that you have less in the way of air leak around the medical or surgical mask. And I would say that for most people is going to be sufficiently comfortable and sufficiently effective, and for some people it may be easier to achieve, easier to acquire, that is, and more comfortable than wearing, let's say, an N95 or KN95.
I can fully agree that N95s are super uncomfortable if you have to wear them all day. I used to work with crab-eating macaques. I worked in a preclinical drug company, so when we did dissections on them, we would have to wear them so to protect ourselves from herpes B, which, if you all don't know, herpes B is extremely deadly to humans. If you get it and you don't catch it in time, it's not a great deal. So I can attest that I understand N95s are extremely uncomfortable. But if we can do it for 8 hours a day, you can certainly wear something that's a little less intensive, right? So I think we've got a couple more questions, and I know we're running out of time. So there's another question that you may or may not be able to answer. Maybe you have these statistics, but how many people have died from the Delta mutation alone?
That's a good question. I don't know that. I know that the Delta variant now constitutes virtually all of the cases in the US. It's really 99%. And so it's I haven't seen information suggesting that it's more serious necessarily, but of course, by infecting a much wider range of people and infecting people so readily, then you will have more deaths as a consequence. It hasn't had as much time as the older variants, of course. I don't know the numbers of how many people have died. I think as far as deaths in the US in general, it's between 650 and 700,000, I think. So overall, and I don't know numbers on how many the Delta has killed. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to make sure that question got covered because we had a couple people ask about that. And I guess on that note, there was recently, I think the CNN article, and I think a couple of other news groups followed, that we now have surpassed 1 in 500 US citizens have died from the coronavirus or COVID-19, because like you were saying, there are multiple coronaviruses out there. So I guess what are your final thoughts on those numbers? One in 500 US citizens have died from something that is potentially preventable if you're vaccinated and masked. What are your final thoughts on that?
I guess my final thoughts are that, and as Oasians and humanists, we know this, and yet as humans, we're also illogical sometimes, or maybe even most of the time. So I would say it's easy to get aggravated with people who don't do what we think is the right thing, whether it's mask wearing or vaccinating or whatever. People who are unvaccinated and then they go to the hospital and they're dismayed that they can't get their elective surgery or their heart attack care or whatever it is. And so, or the people with severe COVID in the ICU, and this is repeated all the time, where they're asking for their vaccine on their deathbed in the ICU. And so it's easy to get aggravated with that, especially when it affects us or our loved ones. But I think, I think we have to, that's why I think studying history is so helpful. These discussions these disagreements will always arise during pandemics. And I think by looking back at the history of previous pandemics, we can be a little more understanding. We can still be vigorous in our support for sensible policies, but we shouldn't, I think, be I don't know, I would say reach across the aisle, if you will, to people that have different perspectives. And maybe you can weave, by studying history, like the 1918 flu, sometimes I think we can weave sensible ideas into a conversation without pointing fingers and saying you're stupid and so on and so forth. I guess that would be my closing thought. I mean, they are stupid, but you don't want to say that.
So. As a teacher, I get that, because I'm just like, I have those conversations with students and parents and other teachers all the time, and I'm just like, I want to say that, but I can't. Well, thank you so much again, and if we can give an Oasis thank you to Dr. Richard Andrews here for coming and speaking to us today about not only just what's happening in Texas, but all around the country and all around the world right now with this pandemic. Thank you so much again for being here. And I will pass along your contact info to folks. If you would like it, I can do that. And have a good rest of your day, as much as you can for a Sunday.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I have to run early, and thanks for the invitation. It's always great to see another Oasis thriving, and you guys have been one of the most successful Oasis communities yet. So thanks for leading the way there. So.
Well, thank you, and have a good afternoon.
All right, bye-bye.
So now that we have all that wonderful information in our brains, I would like to invite back up Miss Amber Martin to play us some more music before our community moment. And before I forget, because Sarah knows I will definitely forget before she comes on to speak, we would like to wish Terry Allen a very happy birthday. I believe it's today, or it was sometime in the vicinity of the last couple days. And I know we have a few other birthdays. So if you want to remind me of birthdays, put them in the chat and I will be glad to do that after we get our music in. Also, I was told to remind you all that there is an art event with Casey Oasis folks this afternoon. Reminder to all of you, if you are going, that you need to be following COVID protocols that we have here at Casey Oasis, and that if you are joining us as a Casey Oasis community member, that you also need to be following our policy handbook around harassment and all that fun stuff. So without further ado, I will let Amber do her thing, and you won't have to wait for me.
Thank you so much. So speaking of COVID and all that it entails, back when it first became a pandemic, I work in healthcare, so I wasn't able to go over to my sister's house and see her while she was pregnant. So I kind of wrote a song about it, and I figured I would sing that one for you while we're on the topic. And it's called Morning Dove. It's on my album. It's out on all the streaming services, so I'll send you a link after I play this song. Please sometimes in life to get back going. I know that you show them you're a beautiful light. So morning, darling, window, please let us all, please let us all go. Morning, darling, window, please let us all go. These times have been hard, so. Alright, so I think I got one more song for you in this little segment, and I figured I would play the title track off my album that I just released in July, and that song is called Honey Eyes. If you end up looking up the album, I went to high school with the artist who drew the album artwork. Her name's Maggie D'Imperio, and I can send you a link to her Instagram account where you can look at all of her other pieces of art. She's incredible. So yeah, this one's called Honey Eyes. And that is it for the segment.
Well, awesome. There are a whole bunch of folks giving you silent claps again, and we will hear from you after our community moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Ew. So without further ado, I know all of you got on this morning to hear our community moment. So if you've never been here before and you haven't a clue what a community moment is, it is somebody from our community that has something interesting to share with us, or maybe they just have something to tell us, get off their chest, whatever it is. Well, today it is our very own Sarah. And as I scroll through to find her name so I can pin her up here, she did not give me any words or warning labels. My warning label would be for her, please help, I'm old and don't understand technology. And before I get murdered, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Okay, so I apologize. I'm for some reason losing my voice today, so I'm going to do my best. And I need to make this so I'm not looking at myself, because then I'll get distracted. So I'm going to probably turn my video off. Okay. Okay, so this is, first of all, I want to give a trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about rape, murder, and assault, all of the things today. So this is Terry Blair. You may have heard of him if you're from Kansas City. I'm going to tell you about him from my perspective firsthand. Anything I'm going to share with you today is either not covered by confidentiality or it's public record information. I first met Terry in 2003 when he was pulled from the Missouri State Penitentiary after serving 21-ish years for murdering his pregnant girlfriend and mother of his 2 children. He beat her so severely that they were unable to identify her for quite a while. When he was questioned about the homicide, he stated that he had beaten her. He didn't mean to kill her, but he had beaten her because she had been prostituting. And he was angry about that. The strange thing about that is there was other evidence that came up that he was actually her pimp also. So that whole thing was kind of confusing. So we don't really know exactly why he was angry with her, if he was also pimping her, but his statements in all the police reports were that he was angry with her for prostituting and he beat her. At that time, when he was released, my caseload was what they consider dangerous felonies. So my caseload was all people that had committed violent offenses, murder, rape, well, not rape, I didn't do sex offenses, but murder, aggravated assault, shootings, robberies, that kind of thing. So what they all had in common were a lot of them had served a significant amount of time in prison. So when they serve a significant amount of time in prison, there's a lot of institutionalization and there's a lot of things that they have to do to adapt to being outside. So it was helpful to have a person that knew what those specific issues were. I will say his issues adjusting were really no different than anybody else for the most part. When he first reported to my office, he's built like a welterweight. So picture like muscular shoulders, muscular arms, tiny waist. But when he came to report to me the first time, the surprising thing about him was his poise. He was very self-assured. He had on, he was dressed nice. He had on a really tight shirt so you could see all his muscles, and sunglasses, which was kind of unusual, like dark sunglasses. Very quiet, very polite. So we saw each other weekly for quite some time. We got to know each other pretty well. He had he definitely expressed an interest when he got out, like most people do that serve a lot of time in prison. They want a normal life. That's something that they want. They want a job, they want a family, they want to settle down, they want a normal life. Whether they're able to do that, that's a completely different story. But generally, when they all come out after doing a lot of time, that is their goal. That's what they want to do. He was in prison what would be considered an alpha male. And I could do a whole thing on prison culture and institutionalization and whatever, but so basically what that means is that when he was in prison, he ran shit, both inmates and probably some corrections officers, but he kind of just did his own thing. So imagine if somebody is an alpha male in prison and they come out and they get a job at a fast food place, and then they have teenagers mocking them, being disrespectful, telling them what to do. So these are the kind of things that some people have to deal with when they are paroled from prison. So, and he was no different in that. The other thing is he had children that he had no contact with for the most part because he had murdered their mother. So when he came out, one of his goals was to have a relationship with his children, which you may have seen his children on the news or whatever, but he did have a relationship with his children. They were, we had to have a lot of talks about boundaries and that thing, and that kind of thing, as with him and with other people when they come out of prison. A lot of times the children are very much, you weren't there for me and this is what you owe me. And so sometimes people will do things like sign over their entire checks to their children. And so we have to talk about other ways to make amends and that kind of thing. So fast forward, I'm trying to make this short. I had to cut some things out. So he had a girlfriend. It didn't work out well. And then not necessarily anything that he did wrong, but sometime shortly after that, I had gotten a call from a previous coworker that now worked at a community agency, telling me that there was a prostitute that they had been working with, and that she had reported to their office and told them that she had been seeing a guy and she'd been staying with him and prostituting and then coming back to the apartment where he was staying. And she'd been there for a few days and that he had raped her. So she had walked to this community agency with him and informed them that, you know, she had been raped and that he was outside. So he was arrested. I did a report. He went back to the Department of Corrections based on that report, but he was never charged with that rape. So he was continued on parole and sent to a halfway house. While he was in the halfway house, they had found the body of they had found the body of a prostitute on Prospect Avenue. She was actually someone else that I used to supervise, and she was despite her circumstances, the happiest, most crazy, fun person ever. Anyway, they found her, they thought it was a drug overdose. And that was, I think, in April. In September of that same year, so 5 months later, they found another prostitute and they linked the two and realized that it was a homicide. Once that hit the news, Kansas City Police Department started receiving a bunch of phone calls that were voice changed, giving information about where to find other bodies and saying things like prostitutes are scum and, you know, stuff like that. And admitting that he killed these prostitutes and giving locations of the bodies. They ended up finding 8 bodies altogether. And they investigated, and during their investigation, they interviewed a lot of prostitutes who all gave descriptions of someone who they had had contact with that was very quiet, very poised, but that he had crazy eyes and that he made them uncomfortable. Some of them reported that he had also raped them. So pretty quickly, they put together a picture of Terry Blair. His DNA was also found on one of the victims. So when he was arrested, crazily enough, even though he was making all these phone calls to the police department, once he was arrested, he denied any of these murders or rapes. He did admit having sex with the one prostitute whose DNA they found, but he still denies that he committed any of these murders. He was originally charged with 8 counts of murder, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 3 counts of rape. He pled to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to 6 life sentences without the possibility of parole. So the interesting thing is where his story begins is that he is the 4th out of 10 siblings. When he was 17 years old, his mother killed his father while several of them, including him, were present. She was not sent to prison. She was placed on probation, which that would not happen now, but she was placed on probation because they thought she had a mental illness. Oddly, there's been speculation that his mother was also thought to be a prostitute. His older brother was convicted of murder in the 80s and was actually executed in Missouri State Penitentiary while Terry was there the first time, serving his sentence for killing the mother of his children. His sister was arrested. This is the sister he lived with when I supervised him. I actually met her several times. She was arrested for murder, and her husband ended up actually taking the sentence for that. And then later on, she was arrested again for murder and was convicted and served 10 years. His half-brother was arrested for rape and armed criminal action, in which he raped the victim, shot her, and beat her almost to death. His nephew is in prison for the son of the same sister that has a murder conviction. The nephew is also in prison for a murder case. And numerous family members have violent crimes in their past. So it's an interesting thing. There's been a lot of stuff on it. I'm not saying these things had anything to do with the choices that he made to take the lives of 8 people, but I'm not saying they're unrelated either. The truth is, we just don't know. And they've done a lot of studies on a lot of speculation, especially on his family. But if you want to know more about him, I can tell you stories all day long, but there's also been podcasts. He was on there was the first 48 on that show. They did that podcast, Wikipedia pages, all the kind of things. But anyway, so that is my community moment, and hopefully I didn't go over too much.
Well, first off, yes, I see already people giving you a round of applause. Thank you, Sarah, for doing a community moment today. I guess I'm going to ask you later on to send me his name, because I am a crime buff. I enjoy true crime stuff, and especially, I shouldn't say enjoy. I feel like that's the wrong word. I am fascinated by true crime stuff, and especially since this individual sounds like a serial murderer, I would particularly like to learn more about him and what his family was up to as well. So thank you again, Sarah, for stepping up, doing that community moment. Was there anything I missed as far as community social events? I know I announced the art thing, and so since I have you on here, if you want to give a little bit more details about that today, that would be awesome.
So the thing today is, it's basically it's not like Brookside Art Fair. It's like a 1 block thing. It's right by a coffee house, and they have local artists that come and set up, and there's a food truck, and they've been doing open mic. So basically, if you want to come and just hang out and eat food and look at art and listen to open mic, bring a chair if you want. There's not really a lot of seating. So, I mean, there's grass, and as far as, I don't think we have anything planned for October yet.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again, Sarah, for your community moment. Thank you for that update on what's happening with our event today. And before I turn the floor back over to Amber, I just need to do my contractually obligated saying of this. Kansas City Oasis is a 501c3. That means we are completely volunteer run, and we rely on donations to get in our speakers, our musicians, and hopefully here in the near future, as COVID hopefully starts to die down, donations pay our bills for what will be our new home. So if you are so inclined to donate today, either as a one-time donation or you want to set up a monthly reoccurring payments, you can go over to kcoasis.org, go up to that donate button, fill out that form, and there you go. You've donated, and we appreciate you for it. So without further ado, I would like to say thank you to everybody. So our speaker that we had earlier, Dr. Richard Andrews, Sarah for doing our community moment, and Amber Martin for playing us music. And I will turn it over to her to play us out this afternoon.
All right, thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna play a Fleetwood Mac tune to end out the day. I almost said night. I'm sorry about that. I think just got. All right. My mom tried to call me. She doesn't know I'm in this. I should have told her, but I texted her to let her know. But anyway, speaking of my mother, my parents only had a few CDs in the house growing up, and Fleetwood Mac was one of them, so I was obsessed with this album. So I learned it a few years ago, and I love playing this one, so here it goes. Now here you go again. Oh, sorry. Now here you go again. You say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to take it down? thank you so much for listening, everybody.
Thank you once again, Amber, for being here and playing for us today. Hopefully we see you again here soon. And hopefully when COVID is over, we can come visit you in your natural habitat.
That would be amazing. I'd love that.
Well, without talking on much more, thank you again to everybody who came and spoke and did music for us today. And thank you for all of you being here. I'm Nikki Actipis, and we will see you all next week.